You and your husband eat the same dinner, the same portion. Maybe you even eat less than him. 2 weeks later, he's down 5 pounds and you've gained 2. And he has the audacity to say, I don't know why it's so hard for you. Just do what I'm doing. Now, this isn't just bad luck. It's not that you're doing something wrong, it's biology. And it's rigged against you from the cellular level up. Today, I'm going to show you exactly why and what that means for how you should be approaching weight loss. Let me just say what every woman watching this is thinking. It is infuriating watching a man decide casually on a Tuesday that he's gonna cut back. Then he just does, and it works effortlessly. Meanwhile, you've been meal prepping for 3 years, tracking every macro, saying no to birthday cake at every party, waking up early to exercise, reading every book, trying every program, and the scale won't budge. Or it goes down and then back up, or it goes in the wrong direction entirely. And then your husband, who ate nachos for dinner twice this week, steps on the scale and announces he lost yet another pound. And I hear this every single day. We eat the same meals. I cook for both of us. How is he losing and I'm gaining? He doesn't even try. He doesn't track anything. He doesn't exercise and he stays the same weight. Or I feel like my body is broken, like something is wrong with me specifically. And here's what I need women over 30 to understand. You're not broken, you're not lazy, and you're not bad at dieting. You're not lacking willpower, discipline, or commitment. You're playing a completely different biological game than he is. And he's playing checkers on easy mode, and you're playing chess in a hurricane. And until you understand why the games are completely different, you'll keep comparing yourself to someone whose body operates on completely different rules. Let me show you exactly what's happening and why I specifically work with women over 30. Let's start with the most fundamental difference. Hormones. Your husband's body runs primarily on testosterone. Your body runs primarily on estrogen. These two hormones give completely opposite instructions about what to do with fat. Testosterone tells the body, build muscle, maintain muscle, use incoming calories for energy and muscle repair. Estrogen, on the other hand, tells your body something completely different. Store fat, especially in the hips. Hold on to calories because you might need them. Your body is not trying to make you miserable. It's doing exactly what it's designed to do over thousands of years of evolution. For most of human history, this was a survival advantage. Women who could store fat efficiently survived famines. They could sustain pregnancies. They could breastfeed babies. And the women who couldn't store fat, they didn't survive. They didn't reproduce. Their genes continue. So you inherited fat storing genetics from a long line of survivors. But in a world of abundant food where you're not trying to survive a famine or sustain a pregnancy, those same genetics work against. So right from the start, before we even talk about anything else, you and your husband fundamentally different metabolic programming. His body defaults to burning, your body defaults to storing. Same food, opposite instructions on what to do with it, but it goes deeper than that. Let's talk about muscle. Muscle is metabolically expensive. It costs your body energy to maintain. Even when you're just sitting on the couch, watching Netflix, your muscle tissue is burning calories. The estimates vary, but roughly 1 pound of muscle burns about 6 to 7 calories per day at rest. 1 pound of fat burns about 2 calories per day at rest. That might not sound like much, but let's do the math. Your husband likely has 30 to 50 more pounds of muscle than you do just because he's male. Testosterone built that muscle during puberty and has maintained it ever since. So let's just say he has 40 more pounds of muscle than you. 40 pounds times 6 calories, that's 240 extra calories burned per day, just existing, just being alive. Over a week, that's 16,080 calories. Over a month, that's about 7,200 calories. That's more than 2 pounds of fat per month just from the muscle difference. He's not trying harder. He's not more disciplined. His body is literally running a higher engine 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, even while he sleeps. So when you eat 1,800 calories, your body might need about 1,600 to function, so you store 200. When he eats 1,800 calories, his body might need 2,200 to function, so he actually burns stored fat to make up the difference. Same meal, same calories, completely different metabolic math. Now, let's go inside the fat cell because this is where it really gets a little unfair. On the surface of your fat cells, you have 2 types of receptors. Think of these as switches or doorways, alpha receptors and beta receptors. Beta receptors open doors. When activated, they allow fat to leave the cell and be burned for energy. Beta means burn. Alpha receptors are like locked doors. When activated, they block fat from leaving the cell. They keep it stored. Alpha means anti-burn. Now, here's the problem. Women have significantly more alpha receptors, especially on the hips and lower body. Men have beta receptors distributed throughout their body. And this is why the fat on your thighs is so stubborn. It's not that you're not trying hard enough to burn it. It's that those fat cells have more locked doors. The fat literally cannot get out as easily. Meanwhile, his fat cells have more open doors. When his body needs energy, fat flows out readily. Same fat cells, different receptor ratios, different ability to release fat. But wait, there's more. Inside your fat tissues, you have two important enzymes that control fat storage and fat release. LPL, lipoprotein lipase, HSL, hormone-sensitive lipase. LPL is like a vacuum cleaner, pulls fat from your bloodstream into your fat cells for storage. More LPL activity means more fat storage. HSL is like a release valve. It breaks down stored fat and releases it into your bloodstream to be burned. More HSL activity means more fat burning. Now, here's how hormones affect these enzymes. Estrogen increases LPL activity in your hips and thighs, and it tells your body store more fat in these areas, protect these reserves. Testosterone increases HSL activity. It tells his body release fat for fuel, use it as fuel. Testosterone also decreases LPL activity in abdominal fat. So his hormones are increasing fat release, more HSL, decreasing fat storage, less LPL, and your hormones are increasing fat storage, more LPL, and making release harder, more alpha receptors. He has the metabolic wind at his back, and you're walking into a headwind. So let me summarize what we've covered so far. Your husband has biological advantages you simply do not have. 1. Testosterone promotes muscle building and fat burning. Estrogen promotes fat storage. 2. He has 30 to 50 more pounds of muscle, burning hundreds of extra calories daily at rest. 3. He has more beta receptors, allowing fat release. You have more alpha receptors, blocking fat release. 4. Hormones increase HSL, fat burning enzyme, and decrease LPL, fat storage enzyme. Your hormones do the opposite. This isn't a level playing field. It was never a level playing field. And when he says, just do what I do, he doesn't understand what works for his body is designed for a completely different biological system. But here's what makes it even more complicated. If all women have estrogen and all women have these receptor differences compared to men, why do some women stay relatively lean while others struggle enormously? You know what I'm talking about. You have a girlfriend who seems to eat whatever she wants and stays thin. You eat the same thing and gain weight. You have a sister who went through menopause with barely any weight change, but you gain 30 pounds. What's the difference? It's not discipline. It's not willpower. It's not some moral failing. It's genetics. On top of the male-female differences I just showed you, there are genetic variations that make some women's bodies even more prone to fat storage, hunger, inflammation, and hormonal chaos. So let me show you the specific genes. The first category involves how your body processes estrogen. Remember, estrogen tells your body to store fat. But estrogen doesn't just float around forever. It has to be metabolized and cleared by your liver. The speed at which you clear estrogen matters enormously. There's a gene called COMT, and its job is to break down estrogen metabolites as well as stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. Some women have fast COMT. They clear these chemicals quickly and efficiently. About 20 to 30% of women have slow COMT. Clear these chemicals more slowly. If you have slow COMT, estrogen metabolites stay in your system longer. Some of these metabolites are inflammatory. Some contribute to estrogen dominance, where estrogen is high relative to progesterone. What does estrogen dominance feel like? Heavy, painful periods, breast tenderness, bloating and water retention, weight gain, especially in the hips and thighs, mood swings and irritability, stubborn fat that won't budge no matter what you do, hot flashes. Sound familiar? Now, your husband doesn't have to worry about estrogen processing. He has tiny amounts of estrogen compared to you. The COMT gene affects him differently, but for you, if you have slow COMT, your body is essentially getting a louder signal to store fat because estrogen is present longer. And your friend without the slow COMT variant, she clears estrogen efficiently. The fat storage signal is shorter. Her body lets go of fat more easily. Same food, same exercise, different genetic process. The second category involves hunger hormones, and this one is huge. There's a gene called FTO, fat mass and obesity associated gene, and it's one of the most studied genes related to weight. FTO influences a hormone called ghrelin. Ghrelin is your hunger hormone. When ghrelin is high, you feel hungry, and when ghrelin drops off after eating, you feel satisfied. And here's what certain FTO variants do. If you have these FTO allele variants, and about 40 to 60% of people have at least one copy, ghrelin doesn't drop after you eat, or it rises again faster. So what does that feel like? You finish a meal and you still feel hungry, or you think about food constantly, or you need a larger portion to feel satisfied. Your willpower feels broken because you're always fighting hunger, and restriction feels impossible to maintain. Your husband might not have these variants, or even if he does, his testosterone and muscle mass gives him a metabolic buffer you don't have. But for you, higher baseline hunger plus a body programmed to store fat plus less muscle burning calories plus hormonal changes of perimenopause is the perfect storm. And no amount of willpower can overcome biology forever. Eventually the hunger wins, not because you're weak, but because your hormones are screaming at you. The third category involves inflammation. In the last video, I explained how visceral fat increases inflammatory cytokines that cause insulin resistance. That cycle, fat to inflammation to insulin resistance to more fat, central to why weight loss becomes so hard after 35. But some women are genetically primed to have a bigger inflammatory response. There are genes controlling TNF-alpha production, IL-6 production, NFKB activation, the master switch for inflammation. And if you have variants that make you a high inflammatory responder, that cycle spins faster and harder than it would for other women. Same hormonal transition, same diet, but your body produces more inflammation in response. So you feel terrible and you can't lose weight. Your husband? Well, men generally have lower inflammatory responses. Testosterone is actually anti-inflammatory in so many ways, and he's not dealing with this layer at all. The fourth category involves insulin sensitivity. There are genes affecting how your cells respond, how efficiently glucose gets transported into cells, and how your pancreas produces insulin in the first place. Now, some women have genetic variants that make them more prone to insulin resistance even before the inflammation from visceral fat makes it worse. If you have these variants, your cells were already less responsive to insulin. Then perimenopause hits, inflammation increases, insulin resistance gets worse, and you're starting behind the starting line. Your husband might have none of these variants, or if he does, his testosterone and muscle mass create enough metabolic demand that it doesn't matter as much. But for you, every genetic vulnerability compounds the female disadvantages you already have. The fifth category involves stress response. Remember COMT? It doesn't just clear estrogen, it also clears cortisol and adrenaline, your stress hormones. If you have slow COMT, you don't just have estrogen issues, you have cortisol issues. When you experience stress, work, family, financial, even just a really hard workout, your cortisol spikes, and that's normal. Everyone's does. But if you have slow COMT, that cortisol spike stays elevated longer than it would for someone else. You literally experience stress longer at a physiological level. And what does elevated cortisol do? It promotes fat storage, specifically in the belly. It breaks down muscle tissue for energy. It increases appetite, especially for sugar and carbs. It disrupts sleeps. It worsens insulin resistance. So if you're stressed and you have slow COMT and you have other genetic vulnerabilities, your body's in a constant state of metabolic emergency, storing fat, breaking down muscle, craving sugar, not sleeping well, and wondering why nothing works. Your husband gets stressed too, but his cortisol clears faster, his testosterone protects his muscle. His body doesn't go into the same crisis mode. Different stress response, different outcome, same household. So do you see how this compounds? The female biological disadvantages I showed you earlier, estrogen, muscle mass, alpha receptors, LPO/HSL, those affect all women compared to men, but then you layer on genetic variations such as slow estrogen processing, higher hunger hormones, increased inflammation response, lower insulin sensitivity, prolonged stress response. And some women have none of these variants and they navigate perimenopause relatively easily. Some women have multiple variants and they get hit from every direction. It's not fair, but it is knowable. And once you know what you're dealing with, you can stop trying strategies designed for someone with different genetics. Now, let me show you why the advice you've been given, including just do what your husband does, has been setting you up to fail. This seems logical, right? You don't need as many calories because you're smaller, so just eat less of the same food. But this ignores everything I just showed you. If you have FCO variants driving hunger, eating smaller portions means you're just constantly hungry and eventually you break. If you have slow COMT, undereating is a stress and it spikes cortisol and your body holds on to fat more desperately. If you have insulin sensitivity issues, the composition of food matters more than the amount. His body might handle those potatoes just fine, but your body might spike insulin and store them as fat. It just depends on your genetics. Smaller portions of the wrong foods for your genetics fix won't work. You need the right foods for your body, which might be completely different from what works for him. He decides to start going to the gym. Within a month, he's visibly leaner. And you've been exercising for years and nothing. Why? When he exercises, especially strength training, testosterone helps him build muscle and burn fat simultaneously. When you exercise, especially high intensity or cardio, it depends entirely on your genetics and hormonal status. If you have slow COMT and you're already stressed, then intense exercise is another stressor. Cortisol spikes, stays elevated, your body goes into fat storage mode. So if you have inflammatory genes, overtraining can actually increase inflammation and you feel worse and store more fat. If you're in perimenopause with declining estrogen, excessive cardio can actually accelerate muscle loss. Exercise is not universally beneficial for weight loss. Intensity and timing of exercise needs to match your body. For some women, less intense exercise produces better results. Walking instead of running, yoga instead of HIIT, lifting weights instead of sprint class. But no one tells you that and they just say exercise more. And they assume it works the same for everyone. Low carb works great for your husband. Men actually do really well on keto or low carb diets. And then you decide to try it. And it might work for a few weeks, but then you plateau and then you start feeling awful, brain fog, fatigue, mood swings. Maybe you even gain the weight back. What happened? Carbohydrate needs vary by genetics and by hormonal status. Some women, especially those with certain genetic patterns, actually need more carbohydrates for optimal thyroid function and hormone production. Cutting carbs tanks their metabolism. Some women do great on low carb, but they need different types of carbs than what generic advice suggests. So if you have FTO variants, the timing and pairing of carbs matters enormously for controlling hunger. If you have cortisol issues, very low carb can be a stress that makes things worse. His body handles carb restriction easily. Your body might rebel against same diet, different genetics, different outcome. So he skips breakfast, he eats in an 8-hour window, loses weight without even trying, and then you try it and you're irritable, starving, can't focus, and somehow you gain weight. Intermittent fasting can be powerful for some bodies, but for women, it's much more complicated. Women's hormones are more sensitive to fasting signals. Extended fasts can disrupt menstrual cycles, spike cortisol, and downregulate thyroid function. If you have FTO variants, fasting makes ghrelin go even higher. Your hunger becomes unmanageable. If you have slow COMT, fasting is a stress that elevates cortisol for hours. If you're in perimenopause, fasting can worsen the hormonal chaos that's already happening. Many women actually do worse with intermittent fasting. They need regular meals to keep blood sugar stable and cortisol in check. But because it works for men and for some women, it gets recommended to everyone. This is the worst one. When nothing works, the assumption is that you are the problem. You must be cheating. You must not be trying hard enough. You must lack discipline. This completely ignores biology. If your genetics are driving hunger signals louder than other people's, willpower is fighting biology. And you can white knuckle it for a while, but biology wins eventually, and it always does. If your genetics are slowing your metabolism through estrogen dominance, cortisol elevation, and insulin resistance, eating perfectly still won't produce results. Willpower is not the answer when the problem is biological mismatch. The answer is understanding your biology and matching your approach to it. So what happens when you stop comparing yourself to your husband, start understanding your specific body? Let me show you some examples. A woman comes to me, she's in perimenopause. She and her husband eat the same dinners. She cooks for both of them. He's maintained his weight for 20 years. She's gained 35 pounds in the last 3 years. She's tried everything. He's tried low carb, intermittent fasting, more exercise. Nothing works for her. So we looked at her genetics. She has estrogen dominant symptoms, bloating, breast tenderness, hot flashes, weight concentrated in the midsection and hips. And she also has variants affecting estrogen receptor sensitivity, and her body responds more strongly to estrogen signals than average. So what does she need? Not what her husband is doing. She needs support for estrogen detoxification to help her liver clear estrogen metabolites. She needs methylation support. Her COMT is slow, partly due to methylation issues, so she needs methylated B vitamins, but it depends on the variant. And she needs to avoid certain foods that are estrogenic. Some things that are healthy for him are actually making things worse for her. She needs to prioritize her stress management. Low COMT means cortisol is compounding her problems. And so within just 8 weeks of a protocol matched to her genetics, her weight starts moving, not because she tried harder, but because she finally stopped fighting her biology. Now, Another woman, I'm going to call her Sarah, her main issue is the belly. She was always able to stay relatively thin, but in the last few years, her midsection had expanded dramatically. Her husband still has a flat stomach. Same age, same meals, and she's been doing intense workouts, boot camp classes, running, HIIT, thinking she needs to burn the belly fat off, and it's getting worse. We look at her genetics, and again, she's a slow COMT, but in this case, the cortisol piece is even more significant than the estrogen piece. She also has variants affecting her HPA axis, her stress response system. Every intense workout is spiking cortisol. Because of her genetics, that cortisol stays elevated for hours. Her body's in chronic stress mode, storing fat in the belly, breaking down muscle, craving sugar. She's been making it worse by trying harder. And so what does she need? Less intense exercise, walking, yoga, light resistance training, adaptogens to support adrenal function, ashwagandha, rhodiola, phosphatidylserine to blunt cortisol spikes. She was shocked when I told her to stop the boot camp classes, but within weeks of the new approach, the belly started shrinking, and her husband, he can do all the HIIT classes he wants, but his body handles it differently. Another woman, her issue is hunger and cravings. She watches her husband eat a normal meal and feels satisfied for hours. She eats the same meal and is hungry again in 90 minutes. She thinks about food constantly. She feels like she's addicted. We look at her genetics. FTO variants, both copies. Her ghrelin levels are genetically amplified. She's not imagining the hunger. It's real. It's biological. And she also has variants affecting dopamine receptors. Her brain doesn't get the same reward signal from food that other people get. So she needs more to feel satisfied. And this isn't a willpower problem, a neurotransmitter and hormone problem. What does she need? Higher protein at every meal, because protein is the most satiating macronutrient and helps to regulate ghrelin. Specific fiber strategies, such as the types of fiber that slow gastric emptying and prolong fullness, and eating more frequently, not intermittent fasting, which makes her ghrelin worse. Nutrients that support dopamine, such as tyrosine, B6, and iron, and blood sugar stability, pairing carbs with protein and fat so she doesn't spike and crash. She stopped trying to eat like her husband, small portions, long gaps between meals, and she started eating in a way that managed her hunger biology. The constant food thoughts quieted down, the cravings became manageable, and the weight started responding. One more example. A woman whose weight won't budge despite doing everything right. Her husband eats more than her. He drinks beer on the weekends. He doesn't exercise much, but he's the same weight he was at their wedding. She eats clean. She exercises regularly. She barely drinks, but she's gained 40 pounds since their wedding. I took a look at her genetics. High inflammatory response. She had variants in genes controlling TNF-alpha and IL-6, and her body produces more inflammation in response to stress. She also has gut-related variants. Her gut barrier is more permeable. Food sensitivities trigger immune responses that doesn't even feel as obvious symptoms. Some of the healthy foods she's eating, things like eggs, almonds, tomatoes, are actually triggering low-grade inflammation in her body, not because they're unhealthy in general, but because they're unhealthy for her genetics. The inflammation is driving insulin resistance. The insulin resistance is preventing weight loss. No amount of calorie restriction fixes inflammation. So what does she need? She needs to identify and remove her inflammatory triggers, which are different from general advice. Anti-inflammatory support, such as omega-3, curcumin, specific antioxidants, gut healing protocols. Her gut barrier needs repair. She needs to focus on foods that reduce inflammation for her specific body. Once inflammation comes down, insulin sensitivity was able to improve. And once her insulin sensitivity improved, weight started moving. So yes, her husband can eat all those inflammatory foods, but her body does not react in the same way. Do you see the pattern? In every case, the woman was comparing herself to her husband or to generic advice and feeling like a failure. In every case, the answer wasn't trying harder at what wasn't working. The answer was understanding her specific biology and matching the approach to it. Different genetics, different hormones, different needs, different path to results. So where does this leave you? First, I want you to stop comparing yourself to your husband. Stop feeling like something is wrong with you because his approach doesn't work for you. His approach was never designed for your body. You have different hormones. You have different body composition. You have different receptors. You have different enzymes, and you have different genetic patterns. Comparing results to his is like comparing a fish to a bird and wondering why the fish can't fly. You're not a broken version of him. You're a completely different biological system that requires a completely different approach. Second, stop guessing. Stop randomly trying diets because they worked for someone else. Stop cycling through programs, hoping this one will be different. Every diet you try that doesn't match your genetics is a waste of time and wasted energy. Worse, it's often making the problem harder by stressing your body, disrupting your metabolism, and reinforcing the belief that you're broken. You're not broken, you're mismatched. Third, get specific about your body. What are your genetic patterns? How does your body process estrogen? How does your stress response system work? What are your hunger hormone levels doing? How does your body respond to inflammation? What are your specific needs? When you know the answers to these questions, everything changes. You stop following generic advice. You stop copying what works for others. You stop fighting your biology, and you start working with it. Finally, match your approach to your specific patterns. The woman with slow COMT needs different support than the woman with the F2 variants. The woman with high inflammatory genes needs different foods than the woman with insulin sensitivity issues. And the woman with estrogen dominance needs different strategies than the woman with cortisol dysfunction. There is no one size fits all. There never was. Your husband's approach fits his body, but you need an approach that fits yours. So the next time you watch your husband effortlessly lose weight while you struggle, the next time he says, just do it, undo it. And the next time you feel like giving up because nothing worked, I want you to remember this. You are not playing the same game. His body has testosterone, building muscle and burning fat. And your body has estrogen, storing fat and protecting reserves. His body has more beta receptors, releasing fat freely. Your body has more alpha receptors, locking fat in. His body clears stress hormones quickly. Your body might hold onto them for hours. And on top of all the male-female differences, you have your own unique genetic patterns that determine exactly how hard or easy this is for you. Some women got dealt an easier hand and some women got dealt a harder hand. It's not fair, but it is knowable. And once you know it, you can finally play your hand instead of trying to play his. The women who figure this out, who stop comparing themselves to men and to other women and start understanding their own biology, those are the women who finally break free. I've seen it happen over and over. I mean, it happened for me. And women who thought they were broken, women who had tried everything, women who were ready to give up, and then they got the information they actually needed about their own bodies, their own genetics, their own patterns, and everything shifted. Not because they found more willpower, not because they finally got serious, but because they finally had the right information. That can be you. I'm Dr. Phyllis, and I help women understand the genetic patterns driving their weight and their health so they can stop fighting their biology and start working with it. If you're tired of comparing yourself to people whose bodies work differently than yours, if you're ready to understand what your body actually needs, subscribe to this channel. I'm going to keep showing you the science they don't teach you, the real reasons behind what you're experiencing, and the real solutions that actually work for your body. Want to know why stress specifically goes to your belly and what your genetics have to do with it? Watch this one next.